I had a real struggle this week. Just generally, struggling. I told some of you, I had a bit of trouble with the dog. We were sort of worried about that. We were sort of worried about all sorts of things. And then I was thinking to myself, well, what am I going to share? I mean, there's so much in there. I mean, it's like, where do we go? We're living in a incredible age. This is the last days. You see it every day. I mean, a guy was arrested for silently praying outside, away from an abortion clinic, turned away from the abortion clinic so that nobody would see what he was doing, and he was arrested for what they thought he was thinking in his head. It's just amazing, isn't it? It's amazing we're at the place we're in, but perilous times will come. And they're here right now. We're living in them. And I thought, what do I talk about that? Because that's a big thing. But then I was talking to a lady at the rescue centre. I said we had trouble with the dog. So we phoned her up and said, look, we've had trouble with the dog. She's nipped a couple of people. What are we going to do about it? And one of the things, she gave us lots of advice, and she told us off roundly because said, basically, it's your fault. It's not. Oh, sorry. Can you not hear? Okay. All right. Well, I thought I had a mic. Okay. Right. So let's dial it. This is the word I got. Dial it back. Okay. Dial it back. She said to us, look, because we said, well, we've lost trust in the dog because, she was fine. And then these people came, a couple of people came, and she's nipped them, she snapped at them and actually marked one of them, but not very badly, thankfully. I mean, if she wanted to bite you, you'd be in trouble. She's a Caucasian Shepherd. But anyway, one thing this lady said to us was basically paraphrasing. She was very nice about it. She said, but you're the problem. It's you that's got the problem, not the dog. The dog is telling you she's not comfortable and you're not doing anything about it. And anyway, she said to us, right, you're going to have to dial it. First of all, she said, what do you want to do? Basically, do you want to keep the dog? She said, well, we want to give her a chance. She's only been here like a week and a bit. And she said, well, that's good. She said, because I think you're the right fit for her. And she said, you're going to have to dial it back. And that was a phrase that stuck in my head. You've got to dial it back. And so I'm going to dial it back, and I'm going to do the Torah readings. I'm going to go through the Torah readings. I'm going to share with you a few thoughts that I had as I was going through these Torah readings. And I hope it'll bless you. It certainly blessed me as I went through it. At the beginning, I read it through, and I thought, thank you, Josh, for giving me this Torah readings. With about, 2 chapters of cursing and 1 of blessing. And I thought, what am I going to do with that? It's like there's much better Torah portions you could have given, okay? But you gave me this one, and that's fine. I'm stuck with it, so let's go. This is the Parashah Ki Tavo. Now, a very interesting thing. I thought it was. You might get bored with it, but for me, last week's Torah portion was Ki Tetzeh. This week's Torah portion is Ki Tavo. Last week's was when you go out to war. This week's is when you come into the land. And I thought, is there a connection here? Is this coincidence? I don't think so. I think we have to understand that in order to come into the land, we have to go out to war. There is a war going on. There's a spiritual warfare going on, which we have to be connected into. And then you can come into the land. So you go out to war and then you come into the land. And there are regulations for both. But anyway, so we're dealing with Ki Tavo. This Torah portion deals with laws and blessings related to entering the promised land, as well as the consequences of disobedience. And I want to say one thing right away. The one thing you have to get into your head is here in Ki... sorry, hang on, I'm going to set my watch. Because if I don't, I should be going on. 15 minutes, okay. I'm going to have to talk very quickly. Okay, all right. Because I don't want to go on too long. So the important thing is that we're here together. We need to fellowship together. It's very important, I think. But anyway, so the one thing to remember is that this is the preparation of the wilderness generation. The people standing here when Moses is saying this stuff, the people who are doing the amens were not part of the original group that came out of Egypt. They are the wilderness generation. They are the next generation. The first generation that refused to go into the land have died. And so what Moses has to do now is to connect these people with their ancestry. He's making them realize that they are Israel. Their parents failed. That generation failed. They were going to go into the land, but they had to connect to the history of the people of Israel. And so keep that in mind. This is the next generation. This is the wilderness generation that God is speaking to. There are only 3 people still alive at this point who were part of the original group: Moses, Caleb, and Joshua. They're the only ones that came out of Egypt. These people probably did. So the first thing is the offering of the first fruits. And we've been doing this for a long time when we were in the congregation in camp, where we would meet on Shavuot. We'd bring our baskets. We'd offer those before the Lord, and we'd have the 2 wave loaves. And this is what this is all about. This joyous celebration. There's some interesting things here. They're commanded to bring the first fruits in a basket to the temple and present them to the priest, and then they make a declaration. It's very important, the witness and the testimony they're making, because they're making it as if they were the people that came out of Egypt. They go through the whole history, and they start with, "A Syrian about to be destroyed was my father." This is what they have to say to the priest. "And my father was a Syrian about to perish. He went down to Egypt and dwelt there, few in number. There he became a nation great, mighty. The Egyptians mistreated us, and we cried out to the Lord God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice." The Lord heard our voice. Yeah, they're connecting to that original group. The Lord heard our voice. So it's always important to connect with the scriptural biblical history. And that's sometimes what we have to do. We have to connect ourselves with these people because we're part of this. We're here today because we are part of Israel, because Yeshua, in his doing and dying, has made us fellow citizens, okay, with Israel. Not Gerim, not strangers. You can look at the strangers and say there are some similarities. We are fellow citizens. We are equal sharers in the covenants and promises. We are Israel. We haven't replaced Israel, but we are Israel. And it's something I'm trying to do all the time, is to try and get that identity firmly fixed in my heart. I want to be one with Israel. So that's something that the Lord's working on me. There's a couple of things here. Different commentators look at that Syrian about to be destroyed. Rashi thinks it's a reference to Laban, who persecuted Jacob. Laban was a Syrian who almost destroyed my father. You could read the Hebrew like that, okay? It's quite an open phrase. But most commentators, it's a reference to Jacob. Jacob, who was oppressed by Laban, almost to the point of destruction. You know, that he knew famine, he knew oppression. And so that's where it comes from. And it's like bringing them almost down to earth. You know, this is where we came from. You know, we were nothing. You know, it was just this one man, this Jacob, and him almost destroyed. And then they go on to say what God did with them, with us. You know, and so they're connecting again. And then they go through, he has brought us into this land flowing with milk and honey. They're testifying to the promises of God. They're saying, yes, this is the land flowing with milk and honey. God told us it would be, and here we're seeing the advantage of it. And then it goes on to the third year tithes. I'm just going to go through this and just look at this, just to share a few things with you. So the third year tithe is for the Levite, the stranger, and the widows. And again, they make a declaration. You know, you're talking about, you know, your relation and writing something to your relation. Testimony is a very powerful thing. Our testimony is important. Our testimony to God's grace and glory in our lives is important. And that's what they're doing. They're giving God the glory and saying, you've blessed us. Here's the blessing. Here, we've used it properly. We haven't used it. We've followed your commandments. This is what you've blessed us with. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And the other thing to get clear in here is that with this wilderness generation, Moses and the Lord is renewing the covenant with them. They, after these things, after the Mount Ebal and Gerizim, which we're going on to, these people knew that they were the covenant people. Now, before that, they just spent 40 years in a kind of limbo. These people, the men had not been circumcised. It was almost like they were just in limbo, and sort of, that sort of God had put them to one side, and they were going round and round and round and round and round till all the generation had died. And so, what this generation must have been feeling like as they came to the end of this time, I don't know. It was like they might not felt part of it all. This is what's happening now. God is making them a part of this. This is now the covenant renewed to them. They are now the people of the covenant. No matter what they felt, it was them that was going to go on with the covenant. Right, okay, so we go on. The next thing is the commands to follow the law in chapter 26 and 16 to 18. There is the commands to follow the law. And I'm going to use the law. You know that's Torah, don't you? You know it's really the instructions of God. I don't really have to do anything. I'm going to use law because that's what's in the New King James. I personally never had a problem with the word law, okay? Because I figure if God gives you a law, then that's a good law. You know, we follow laws every day, don't we? You know, I follow the law down here today. I follow the law. I kept to the speed limits, mostly. But I do try and keep to the speed. I'm aware of them. Because it's a good law. You know, that is a good law. It means if somebody sort of steps out in front of you and you're going at 20 miles an hour, you will stop. If you're going at 40, there's a chance you won't. So it's a good law. God's laws are good laws. Okay, we got to get that first and foremost. And then he gives us the consequences of obedience in verse 19, where down to 19, but at the end of it, he says, then he will set you high above all the nations that he has made in praise, in name, and in honor, that you may be a holy people to the Lord your God, just as he has spoken. The holiness that they were called to, the obedience they were called to, was for others to see as well. And to see, here's a people doing what their God's saying, and look how he's blessing them. That was the idea, okay? I have to keep that pretty much in mind as we go on. And then we have the blessings and the cursings. Whoa. I mean, Mount Gerizim is a rocky mountain. Mount Ebal was a bald mountain. These were just barren desert heights. And on these desert heights, the law was written on these stones and set up. Okay, in chapter 28, 1 to 14, we have all the blessings, which include prosperity, health, and success. And then the cursings are from 28, 15 to 19. That's where it says, cursed will you be, in the field, in the city, in the what, if you don't keep God's commandments. And then 42 verses of detailed curses, some of which, honestly, make my toes curl. I mean, what? 42 verses of detailed curses, some of them awful, terrible. So what's it all about? Well, there's a mashal on Ki Tavo. I looked one up. And the mashal goes that there was a king. Oh, you may have done this one, actually. The king who had 2 servants. And he sent these servants off on a mission, gave them a task to do in a foreign country. And he said to them, I want you to do this task for me, but I want you to follow my instructions exactly. He said, I want you to go where I tell you to go, on the road I tell you to go. You'll stay at the place I want you to stay. You must follow my instructions exactly. So they both set off, and eventually they return. One of them returns, and he's whole and healthy. He's completed the task, and the king rewards him. He said at the start, I'll reward you if you come back, but you must do it according to my instructions. The other one was halfway along the journey, and he came to a road that he knew was a shortcut to where they were going, and decided he was going to take the shortcut. He came back second, bloodied and bruised and robbed. And that story tells us what happens if we don't follow the instructions of God. It's up to us. See, all these curses need never have happened. Sometimes we get thought on the negative. How could God do this? How could God do this? Well, God doesn't want to do this. He just says, I will do it if you don't do this. It's an if-then conditional loop. Is that right? It's an if-then conditional loop. If you do this, then this will happen. If you do this other thing will happen. It's pretty plain, isn't it, really? So, now, there's one other thing I wanted to deal with here, because very often what people will do with this, and what I've heard people say to me before now, is, well, all those curses, Messiah's redeemed us from all those curses. He's redeemed us from the curse of the law. We don't have to worry about the law anymore because he's redeemed us from the curse of the law. Galatians 3:13, Messiah has redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. And that's true. Yeshua has redeemed us from the curse of the law. But the problem is they don't use the right grammar. They say we've been redeemed from the law, which is a curse. Okay, it's the law that's the curse. But this is in the genitive for those of you who like a bit of grammar. And it simply means that we've been redeemed from the curse that comes about from the law. And it's not talking about curses, it's talking about curse. It's talking about death, which was the curse that belonged to the law. Okay? He who sins dies. Okay? So it's the wrong grammar, but it's very important, because we go from the law being a curse to there just being a curse of the law that belongs to the law. And that's what that's what he's talking about there. Messiah's redeemed us from the death that comes from breaking God's law. He's given us life. He's redeemed us. Are there still curses? I believe so. I believe if you don't do what God wants you to do, there will be a curse. Let me tell you, I'm going to share a personal testimony. I told some of you, and I said last week, we had this dog, a rescue dog, Caucasian Shepherd Cross. Boy, anyway, never mind. She's massive. I mean, I looked at her the other day, I said, what have we done? She takes up half the living room. It's like, anyway, she's a lovely dog. She's got a lovely temperament. With us, she's absolutely soft and lovely. But we had a couple of issues. She got very defensive with people coming to the door. She nipped a couple of them. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. So thank God. If she wanted to bite you, you'd lose a hand. It's like she's got canines like what? Sorry? Oh no, Sue. Oh no, oh Bella. But we had to eat humble pie because we were told 2 weeks, no visitors. 2 weeks, the house. 7 days, the house, nowhere else. After 7 days, a walk in the house. She said, keep her world small. Keep her world small. And we didn't, because my daughter came. They did it very sensitively, and Sarah came in. Noah came in afterwards, Evie, then Joe. And she was fine. She was fine with that. And they didn't take any notice of the dog. They let the dog come to them, and then they gave her a treat, and that seemed to work. And so we thought, we're on a winner here. She's fine, And so we ignored the instructions. We had a friend come up in the afternoon. That was fine. So we thought, well, yeah, we're on to a good thing here. And then my son and his fiancée came up. Anyway, to cut a long story short, she was not comfortable with my son being there. I mean, he's 6'7", so it's probably a bit intimidating. And he went straight forward to stroke her, and she was, oh no, and we didn't see it. I mean, talk about thick. I mean, it's like we're having to wake up big time. She was telling us all the time, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with this. And she started to reeve her nose up. She started to back down. Her tail went down, her ears went up. And none of those I read at the time. What am I trying to say to you? Well, you've got to keep the instructions. If you're given instructions, you've got to follow them. We were given instructions by people who knew what it was to have a rescue dog and knew what rescue dogs were like. But no, we thought we'd go with a shortcut. We'd take the shortcut. Well, we learned very quickly that it's no good. And that's when she said, you've got to dial this back. You've got to dial it right. They were good instructions, but we thought we knew better. And it's always a thing with the Lord, We sometimes think we know better. And this is what we're getting today in the world today. Men think they know better, and they don't. It's an awful time. When you look at these curses, I mean, what you do with them, they're so horrible, some of these curses. But the thing is, there's a progression. You go from being just diminished in the field, your crops don't do so well, your family doesn't do so well, to come into a place where you've lost all compassion. And that's what happens, I think, when the Torah is not the basis of our societies, of our families. You lose compassion. That's what Yeshua meant, I think, when he said, in the last days that the love of many, for the lack of Torah, the Torah-lessness, the love of many will grow cold. Do you find the world a cold place now? Do you find it a place with not a lot of compassion? I find it's getting a more and more violent place now. I'm going to go controversial here. I struggled a bit with what Israel did to the Hezbollah. I understand. Sorry? Okay, fine. Yeah, right. I can't think of who else would be able to do that. But anyway, okay. I understand, but it's a violent world today. And I don't say that they didn't have to do it. I'm not saying that it wasn't it was a good targeted thing to do. It took out the people they wanted to take out mostly. But there's always damage, always collateral. There's always collateral damage, and it's a horrible thing. A couple of kids were killed. I don't want to get into a debate on who's right and who's wrong. All I'm saying is that they're having to do some very not cruel. That's not the word I'm looking for. Horrible things. But they have to do it because what else are they going to do? This is war. What I'm trying to say is we're living in violent times. In the last days, that word perilous means violent. Violent times are coming, and they're here already. And it's because we've gone away from this book here. We've gone away from it. I'm talking about society as a whole. I when I was first saved, we went to Wales to a Pentecostal church, and the first thing we got involved in was a Luis Palau evangelistic crusade. I know Luis Palau, he's like a Latin American Billy Graham. He used to have these big crusades, and his theme was back to the Bible or back to the jungle. Back to the Bible or back to the jungle. That's what you've got at the end of these curses. They're back in the jungle. This is like, anything to survive. No compassion, no decorum, no sort of, no restraint. And that's where you go. I didn't really want to say this, but it strikes me now that even though people say, back to the Bible and back to the jungle, what they usually mean is back to some of the Bible. Back to some of the Bible. Because if you want to go back to the Bible to get out of the jungle, you've got to go here. You've got to go to the Torah. You've got to go to the laws and the commandments and the precepts of God, because that's what will get you out of the jungle. And that's what the people would see in Israel who were keeping God's Torah, God's commandments. They would see a nation, a righteous nation, a nation of compassion, a nation that truly loved one another because of what God was asking them to do. And they were doing what God wanted them to do.
It shocked me the way that about get away and the gate that movies. So I played them, get it back, very well.
Yeah. Well, you can dial all this all the way back, really, to Abraham. Abraham, whose wife had a good idea. We're not going to be able to produce children, so maybe you better sleep with my Egyptian maidservant. And lots of trouble started from there. It went on when this generation went into the land, and they were told to displace all the peoples there, and they were told that some of the tribes were to be completely eliminated. I'm going to finish in a minute, but I watched a debate with a guy who debates college students. He stands up on the stage and they ask their questions, and then Frank, somebody his name is, I can't remember. Anyway, he was debating somebody who said, how cruel God was that that he asked that the Israelites destroy children, all the rest of it as he went in, and he dealt with that question. He was saying, well, and he can't remember his answer, but the interesting thing was the next question came up is, why didn't God deal with evil? And he said straight away, you can't have it both ways. He said you can't blame God for destroying these tribes who were evil, and then say, why does God allow evil? God does move against evil. And one person had a problem with that, and then somebody else had a problem because he didn't move against evil. It's like, it's not logical. It's really strange. But anyway, okay. I want to deal with one more thing, and then I'm going to close. Deuteronomy 29 and verse 4. I always like to deal with the controversial stuff, because if it bothers me, I want to know. I want to try and fight that. What's it all about? 29 and verse 4. Yet the Lord has not given you a heart to perceive, and eyes to hear, and ears to hear to this very day. Well, what chance do they stand? If God hasn't given them ears to hear and eyes, a heart to perceive and eyes to hear, ears to hear to this very day, well, what chance do they stand? God has not given them the ability to understand. God has not given them the ability to see. So surely it's God's fault then, isn't it? Well, you could say that, couldn't you? But then we go to Matthew 13, which is one of the Parashah readings for today, and here's the explanation. All right, find it in a minute. See, if it'd been electronic one, I'd just gone there, but anyway. But this is the parable of the sower. Parable of the sower, 1 to 23. I don't know. Matthew 13. I'm going to look at from verse 11. I've been just told in the parable of the sower and its meaning. Yeshua goes on. Disciples said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered them and said to them, "Because it's been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, Hearing you will hear and shall not understand, seeing you will see and not perceive, for the hearts of this people have grown dull." It's not God's problem, it's the people's problems. That's why he can't give them a heart to perceive, because they're not listening. Their ears are hard of hearing. This spoke to me this week. I was not listening. This lady from the rescue center was telling me all I needed to know to keep that dog secure and safe. I was not listening. And their eyes their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. So the problem of God not giving them a heart to perceive is not because he didn't want to, it's because they didn't want to. There was going to come a time when they would not listen. In Proverbs, I've been really blessed. I've been going through the book, I've been going through the book of Proverbs with Baruch's teaching, and it's been eye-opener. But there was something that having the dog, I just noticed. It says in Proverbs 7 and verse 24, now therefore listen to, he's always saying, listen to me, hear me. My son, listen to me, listen to my commandments. And here is, now therefore listen, and that's Shema to me, my children. That means pay attention and be ready to act. In other words, it's a thing of obedience. This Shema is a listening with the intent to obey. And then he says, as a parallel, pay attention, kashav, to the words of my mouth. And that kashav, it means to prick up the ears. Like an animal does. Like I noticed that when she's like a bit nervous, the dog's ears go up. I mean, they don't stick right up because she's got floppy ears, but you can see her ears go up, and that's a sign. You got to watch for that. Something's caught her attention. But I thought that's what we have to do with God. You see, we have to prick up our ears. It's something we have to do, and we have to incline our ear to what He's saying, and not make it up for ourselves. You know, and I think that's, I'm going to leave that there. But listening to God is very, very important. And the way we can mostly listen to God is through His Word. What is God saying in His Word? Because I'll tell you what, if we don't know God's Word, if we don't have that knowledge of God's Word in these last days, we will be taken off a track. There is one more thing I want to say, and I'm going to finish. The big problem today, a big problem with this verse for me, for this section for me, was the curses. You know, they're so graphic, they're so awful. And yet I was thinking, you know, today nobody tells anybody the bad news anymore. You know, there are people who are telling people the good news. You know, Yeshua loves you, you know, He wants to save you and all the rest of it. But the point is, you have to know the bad news first. What from? What does He need to save me from? Some people don't think they need saving from anything. So you have to have the bad news, and you have to have it like it is here, laid out for you, graphically. The blessing bit, well, that's, you know, if God says, I'm going to bless you, you can say, oh, great, you know, I'll have that, I'll be blessed. And it's not too bad, but you have to know what is the consequence of not following God, of not being obedient. So we need the bad news. You can't, I was thinking when I was doing this of Jonathan Edwards, who was instrumental in the New England revival, I think 1600s, I'm not sure. He was a very modest man, and he used to sit in the pulpit with a candle and his glasses and read his sermon. He would just verbatim, just read it out. And as he was reading it, the verse about the slippery slope, the sinner sliding down into Sheol, you know, it's like a slippery slope into Sheol. People were shaking, crying. They were convicted by the Holy Spirit, because that was the bad news. They were going to a lost eternity. We need to give people the bad news sometimes before we give them the good news. Because unless they know what the bad news is, they won't know that they need the good news. They'll think they can get by as it is. And you can't. Well, I'm going to finish there. I hope it's been of some benefit to you. I was blessed by doing it. I was humbled by doing it. And I had an object lesson in what happens when you don't listen to God's instructions. I was listening. I heard everything she said, but I didn't incline my ear. I didn't prick up my ears. So prick up your ears, guys, because God wants to speak to you. All right.